So that's it then. It's just been announced that Mayor Sadiq Khan of London has done exactly what he was threatening to do. That is that he is going to extend the ULEZ scheme, the ultra low emission scheme, from central London all the way to outer London, covering basically all of greater London, right up, pretty much right up to the M25. I mean, there's a few areas that are exempt. That's going to cause a whole lot of confusion, but mostly it'll be covered. And this is going to happen from August 29th, 2023, which is August next year. After that, if you have a car like the one that I am in right now, driving around happily in North London, just outside the ULEZ zone, then I will have to pay £12.50 a day to drive this car. Now, he's gone ahead and done this, despite the fact that 80% of people in the affected areas, i.e. in this outer London or London outer London area, 80% of people actually opposed this scheme. They said they didn't want it, but he's decided he's going to go ahead and do it. And in fact, the government as well told him not to do it because of the cost of living crisis that we're under. We'll come a bit more on that in a minute, but the fact is that it's going to put a lot of unnecessary pressure on people that are already reeling from the multiple economic and political impacts that we're having post-pandemic, Ukrainian war happening, the government in floundering around, not knowing what to do with itself or with our money. This is just going to make things even worse. This ruling will affect about 200,000 cars. Now, he claims that it will benefit the health of 5 million people. Well, hang on a minute. There's just under 9 million people is the population of London. How does it affect 5 million people? I'm not sure where those numbers are from. I don't know how that working out has been done. There will be a grace period for people with disabled badges. They can actually keep their cars until 2027, and the Scrappage scheme is back. The Scrappage scheme, which is responsible for the death of so many wonderful modern classic cars, including I would imagine a few of the type of car that I'm in right now, a 1989 BMW E30 325i, pristine condition. This car, I will not be able to drive this now after August or next year. It has to go, and that's a real shame, because basically it's only been since March of this year, 2022, that I rekindled my love affair with this car, because I used to own one in the late 90s. This car gets such a fantastic reception wherever I drive it around London. You know, people will give you a thumbs up, they'll wave, they'll smile. It rekindles memories. You know, people just like to see it. You know, it brings joy. No longer. Cars like this it'll be very difficult, very expensive to drive them. I'm not paying £12.50 every time I leave my car park in this car. That's absolutely ridiculous. So £110 million is going into a new scrappage scheme. Basically, I would call it the new car killer scheme. That's about to happen, and they reckon it'll affect about 200,000 cars. So 200,000 cars are going to be impacted by this. Which are those cars? Well, those cars are the ones that are not ULEZ compliant, such as this one. But it also affects most petrol cars, but not all, because some actually are exempt. But most petrol cars built before 2005, and most diesel cars built before 2015. That diesel thing is going to upset a lot of people. It's going to be a problem for a lot of families that own diesel SUVs. For them, it's going to be terrible, because suddenly their perfectly good car, I mean 2015 is not an old car, they can no longer drive around in, and it's going to affect a lot of businesses, because they obviously will have diesel vans and stuff, and it will affect them as well. So what is it that they're expecting people to do? Go out and buy new cars? Well, newsflash guys, newsflash Sadiq, brother Sadiq, there are no new cars. The new car market has been in disarray ever since post-pandemic, when they find they didn't have enough computer chips to build enough cars. Things have now gotten worse, because supply was supposed to return to normal around the middle of this year, 2022, but then of course the war in Ukraine happened, and that made things even worse. Now we're talking about no stability in production until across the spectrum of the automotive field. Some companies are doing better than others, notably the Chinese, but no stability, I think, in terms of production until probably the fourth quarter of next year. So prices, of course, have rocketed for new cars, but not just for new cars, because it's had a knockdown effect or trickle-down effect on the used car market. If there's not enough new cars in the market, then people who need to change their cars are buying used cars. Get this, used cars are up 47% on pre-pandemic levels. The average price of a used car now is £18,000. That's a lot of money for a used car, and that's particularly, we're talking about those families that I just mentioned. They're going to have to give up their diesel SUVs, and they may be looking for a new used SUV. We're talking a pricey proposition here. Thank you very much, Sadiq Khan. Thank you so much, man. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. You can check out all the details of this. If you go here, you can see videos and everything about this car. Brown car guy. So that's an example of, you know, that's an example you saw right there of the fact that the attention this car gets, the joy that it spreads, people just love seeing it, you know. So and I won't be able to do this anymore. That's just not going to happen now. So coming back to the notion that people are going to buy new cars, less polluting cars. Ideally, people living in London area are just going to go, well, let's not buy any petrol diesel cars at all, let's buy electric cars. Well, keep in mind the electric cars are still about 35% more expensive than their equivalent petrol or diesel cars. They also tend to hold their value very well. Even a used electric vehicle is about £23,000 to buy. And then of course there's the whole discussion, which really does need to be got into, about the environmental impact of those electric cars. Because electric cars, I am not anti-electric car, I'm not anti-EV, I'm very much for them, I'm very much in favor of them. I very much agree that they are definitely part of our solution going forward. I don't think they're the only solution, but I think they are a significant part of the solution. But the way I want to see it happen is I want it to be a natural transition. You know, I want people to naturally move out of older cars into newer cars. What governments and people around the world are trying to do is to get everybody to move to electric cars, okay? We are talking in the UK alone, a total car park, there's a total vehicle population of about 40 million vehicles, right? Each electric vehicle produces over 26 tons of CO2. That's even before it's been delivered to its owner. That's because of the production cost, the extraction cost of batteries and resources and everything that you need, and the production that goes into that car, plus the delivery and everything. That's 26 tons before it's even turned the wheel in the hands of the new owner. An average new car, ICE or diesel, is about 6.5 tons. If you look at a car like this, the car that I'm in at the moment, it would take me 40 years to produce that amount of CO2 pollution. So in one sense, you're going, okay, you know, we're talking about people's health there, and definitely, who doesn't want that? The average age of a car in the UK is about 8.5 years. Therefore, most of those cars are already falling into ULEZ compliancy, and it's at 200,000 cars. Is that a significant amount? Is it worth all the expense that they're going to have to go into in terms of extending the ULEZ scheme, for example, with the road signs, the road markings, and of course the cameras that monitor and fine us ultimately? That's a big investment that's going to happen. So if he thinks he's just going to make money off this, wow, I mean, you're going to spend a lot of money, and I don't think that many cars will actually bring you that much income. And even with EVs, you know, that's not as appealing as it once was, because of course there's no government subsidy on them now. They removed that, so the government doesn't help you buy an EV, and you're thinking, well, at least I don't have to pay road tax. Well, that's changing. You will have to pay about £165 a year for taxes, and then of course the luxury car tax still applies to electric cars, will apply to electric cars. Actually, it doesn't now, but it will do in the future. And the luxury car tax, what is that? That's for cars that cost more than 40 grand. And let's be honest, most new EVs in the market cost more than 40 grand. And the luxury tax is £355 per year for the first 5 years. And then the other thing about EVs is the cost of running them. Of course, the cost of energy, as we all know, is going up dramatically. In fact, charging an EV now at a public charging point is only like within 2 pence per mile the running cost of a petrol car. You know, there used to be a significant gap, but now it's because the cost, particularly charging at a public charger, is more expensive than charging at home. You can save a little bit of money, but it's still going to add a significant amount to your bills. But it will be cheaper than running a petrol car for sure. Even public charging points will be cheaper, but not as cheap as it was. So that gap is getting smaller. Admittedly, that gap will increase a little bit again, because the other thing that they, apart from this tax that they're introducing on electric cars that they announced in this autumn mini budget, whatever you want to call it, what they didn't reveal was that the OBR also reckons that in order to meet their targets, they will have to increase fuel duty on petrol from March next year, which will be to the tune of about 12 pence. Don't forget, they did put it down 5 pence this year, even allowing for that. You're talking about 7 pence. At the moment, I'm just at the petrol station now. It's £1.63 still at this petrol station. Add 7 pence, you're talking about, we're going back up to about 170 plus for a litre. I suspect that by next year, towards the end of next year, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see £2 a litre for petrol, not for diesel, but actually for petrol. So we're being hit hard by the cost of running and buying cars. You think, okay, well, they want us to move to public transport. Public transport is in disarray because there are strikes every other week. It's going crazy. They can't even resolve that. And again, as the case has been made time and time again, particularly I guess by those 80% who objected, who opposed this proposal, was that in outer London, it is not so easy to use public transport. Invariably, what normally happens is if I want to get from one place in North London to another place in North London, and I want to take the tube, then I actually have to go into town somewhere, change, you know, at a Baker Street or Bond Street or something like that, and then come back out again. Or if I take a bus, it'll be like 2 or 3 buses, and it will be about 3 times the time duration to make that distance as it would be in a car. So this is going to hit a lot of people very, very hard. I think it's extremely wrong, but let's now move to classic cars. I've already touched on the fact that classic cars are very low usage. They're therefore very low emissions because they don't get used very much, but also they're well looked after. They're mollycoddled even, if you like, and you know, and they're just wonderful things to behold, as you just literally saw that as we were on camera. And these cars are now going to be killed off, and the fact is that there is a 40-year rule for classic cars. Cars over 40 years. That means they have to be older than 1982. There are certain Lamborghini Countashes and certainly Diablos that fall into that bracket that now cannot be driven in London. Can you think? Just imagine that. The McLaren F1 falls into that bracket. So the classification of classic cars is redundant. Now, I have made a detailed video on ULEZ and the problems with ULEZ, and the links are in the description or above here somewhere. And I've also done a detailed video on the fact that why the classic car classification needs to be changed, because it's actually wrong and goes against the United Nations sanctioned approved classic car specification or classification from an organization such as FIFA, which is the Federation, International Federation of Classic Automobiles. So, all words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but it's just wrong. The classification is wrong, and in fact, there is an allowance from FIFA for not only cars older than 30 years being definitely classics, which of course this would then qualify, but even room for cars older than 20 years as being classed as young timers. And I think that, you know, if they put a mileage restriction or something like that on classic cars, and they say, okay, well, you know, I mean, yes, I'm using this car really often, but I don't commute anywhere, so I'm not driving it every single day, and most of my mileage is out of town anyway. So it seems crazy that all of a sudden I can't operate this vehicle in town. It cannot be seen, it cannot spread the joy, I can't enjoy it, and I can't, and then you're talking about car meets, car events, talking about the Ace Cafe on the North Circular. How is that going to be impacted? You're talking about the business, the classic car business. There's garages and specialists and restoration companies within the M25 circle that are also going to be impacted. This really has not been thought through. I think it's completely the wrong decision, and I think it should be. I think there should be another famous U-turn, this time from a Labour mayor. But if there isn't going to be a U-turn, then they really need to look. Sadiq, I plead with you, brother. Come on, dude. Come on. Look at classic cars again. Look at classic cars. At least bring that down to 30 years. It doesn't make sense, and please let's not scrap a huge amount of wonderful model classics just because people are going to get a couple of grand for them, or even less actually. Let's not do this. This news sucks. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video as well if you can. And while you're at it, check out these guys who also sponsor my content. I am deeply grateful to them because it helps me to buy new equipment, put fuel in the cars, and yes, buy a cup of coffee. You can do the same. Just go here or right here on YouTube. Just hit these three little dots down here and click on thanks. Make sure you're signed in first. My content is free, but this is how you can help me keep it that way. I may even send you a gift. Oh, by the way, watch this next.